Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she bent over another wounded soldier. The makeshift field hospital was nothing more than a bombed-out school building, its windows blown out and walls cracked from artillery fire. The smell of antiseptic, mixed with dust and fear, filled the air. She had been working for 18 hours straight, her small frame moving between the injured men who kept arriving on stretchers. At 24 years old, Maria stood barely 5 feet tall and weighed less than 100 pounds. The other medics often joked that a strong wind could blow her away, but what she lacked in size, she made up for in determination. She had volunteered as a field medic when the war reached her village, leaving behind her job as a schoolteacher to help save lives. The sound of approaching vehicles made everyone in the hospital tense up. Maria looked through the broken window and saw 3 military jeeps racing toward them, kicking up clouds of dust. The lead vehicle was smoking, and she could see bullet holes in its side. Her heart sank. More wounded were coming, and they were already overwhelmed. The first stretcher came through the door carried by 2 soldiers who looked exhausted. On it lay Sergeant David Mitchell, a tall man with broad shoulders, who appeared to be unconscious. Blood soaked through his uniform from wounds in his leg and shoulder. The soldiers who brought him were breathing heavily and looked worried. "We found him about 2 miles from here," one of the soldiers explained to Maria as they set the stretcher down. "His unit was ambushed. He's lost a lot of blood, but he's still fighting." Maria quickly examined the sergeant. His pulse was weak, and his skin was pale from blood loss. The wounds needed immediate attention, but as she looked around the crowded hospital, her heart sank. Every bed was full, and the doctor was already operating on another critical patient. There were no supplies left for major surgery. "Dr. Williams is busy with the colonel," the head nurse whispered to Maria. "This man needs surgery now, or he won't make it through the night." Maria felt a cold fear grip her chest. They were in an impossible situation. The sergeant needed advanced medical care that their field hospital couldn't provide. The nearest proper hospital was in the town of San Rafael, but that was 3 miles away through dangerous territory. The roads were controlled by enemy forces, and no vehicles could make the journey safely. She knelt beside the sergeant and noticed his eyes flutter open for a moment. He tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. She leaned closer and heard him say, "Please, don't let me die here." Those words hit Maria like a punch to the stomach. She looked at this brave soldier who had been fighting to protect innocent people, and she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. If the hospital couldn't save him, she would find another way. "We need to move him," Maria announced to the room. "Move him where?" asked the head nurse. "There's nowhere safe to go." "San Rafael," Maria replied firmly. "They have a real hospital there with proper surgical equipment." "Are you crazy?" one of the soldiers said. "That's 3 miles through enemy territory. No vehicle can make it. And even if it could, he'd die from the bumps and blood loss during the ride." Maria looked down at the sergeant again. His breathing was getting weaker. She knew that staying here meant certain death for him, but taking him to San Rafael seemed impossible too. The roads were too dangerous for vehicles, and the rough terrain would kill an injured man. Then an idea formed in her mind. It was crazy, dangerous, and probably impossible. But it was the only chance the sergeant had. She would carry him to San Rafael herself, on foot, through the hills where vehicles couldn't go. "I'm taking him myself," she declared. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Maria as if she had lost her mind. The head nurse shook her head sadly. "Maria, you're a wonderful medic, but you can't carry a man his size 3 miles. He weighs twice what you do. And even if you could, the enemy patrols would spot you." "The hill paths are safer than the roads," Maria replied, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "I know those trails like the back of my hand. I grew up in these mountains." She began gathering medical supplies, bandages, and pain medication. Her hands moved with purpose as she prepared for the journey that everyone thought was impossible. The sergeant's eyes opened again, and this time he seemed more alert. "What's happening?" he whispered. "We're getting you to a real hospital," Maria told him gently. "Just hold on a little longer." "How?" he asked, confusion evident in his voice. Maria looked into his eyes and saw both hope and fear. She knew her next words would sound unbelievable to him. "I'm going to carry you there." The sergeant's eyes widened in disbelief. He looked at Maria's small frame and then at his own large body. "That's impossible. You can't." "Watch me," Maria interrupted with a small smile. "I've been told I can't do lots of things in my life. But here I am." She began fashioning a special carrying device using rope and canvas from the medical supplies. The other medics watched in amazement as she worked with skilled hands, creating something that could distribute the sergeant's weight across her back and shoulders. It wasn't perfect, but it might work. As she worked, Maria thought about her grandfather, who had taught her to hunt in these mountains when she was a child. He always said that strength came from the heart, not the muscles. She remembered carrying deer through these same hills when she was just a teenager, finding ways to move weights that seemed impossible for someone her size. The sergeant watched her preparations with growing amazement. Despite his pain, he found himself believing that this small woman might actually be able to do the impossible. There was something in her eyes, a determination he had seen in the best soldiers he had served with. "Why are you doing this for me?" he asked softly. Maria paused in her work and looked at him. "Because everyone deserves a chance to go home," she said simply. "And because someone has to try." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Maria made her final preparations. She knew that once they left the relative safety of the field hospital, there would be no turning back. The journey ahead would test every limit of her strength and endurance. But looking at the sergeant's face, she knew she had no choice. She was his only hope. The first step was the hardest. Maria carefully helped the sergeant onto her back, using the makeshift carrying system she had created. His weight nearly knocked her to the ground immediately. She gritted her teeth and adjusted the straps, feeling his bulk settle across her shoulders and back. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. "This is insane," the sergeant whispered, his voice filled with pain and worry. "Put me down. I won't let you kill yourself trying to save me." "Too late now," Maria replied through gritted teeth. She took one careful step, then another. Her legs shook under the combined weight, but she didn't fall. "We're doing this." The other medics gathered around the entrance of the field hospital, watching in stunned silence as Maria began walking toward the mountain path. Each step looked painful, and several times it seemed like she might collapse. The first mile was through familiar territory near the village where Maria had grown up. She knew every rock and tree, every safe path through the hills. But carrying the sergeant's weight made everything different. Paths that had been easy for her to navigate alone now became serious challenges. Her breathing became heavy within the first 10 minutes. "I can feel you shaking," the sergeant said. "Please, just put me down and go back. Save yourself." Maria didn't waste breath answering. She focused all her energy on taking the next step. Her grandfather had taught her that the mind gives up long before the body actually reaches its limits. She pushed those thoughts of surrender away and kept walking. As they climbed higher into the hills, the path became steeper and more difficult. Maria's legs burned with exhaustion, and sweat poured down her face despite the cool evening air. The sergeant's weight seemed to increase with every step. Several times she stumbled, catching herself just before they both fell. During one particularly difficult climb, Maria had to stop and rest against a large boulder. Her whole body was trembling, and she could barely catch her breath. The sergeant felt her struggle and spoke softly. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maria," she gasped. "I'm David. And Maria, you're the bravest person I've ever met." She smiled despite her exhaustion. "Save the compliments for when we reach the hospital." As they continued, David began talking to help distract both of them from the pain and fear. He told her about his family back home, his wife Sarah, and their 2 young children. He spoke about his farm and how he planned to teach his kids to ride horses when he returned. Maria found that listening to his stories helped her forget about the weight on her back. "What about you?" David asked. "Do you have family?" "My parents died when I was young," Maria replied, between heavy breaths. "My grandfather raised me. He taught me that when someone needs help, you help them, no matter what." He sounds like a wise man. He was. He died last year, but I still hear his voice sometimes, especially when things get difficult. As if summoned by her words, Maria could almost hear her grandfather's voice, encouraging her to keep going. She remembered him saying that true strength wasn't about muscle, but about refusing to quit when others were counting on you. The second mile brought new challenges. The path became rocky and uneven, forcing Maria to watch every step carefully. One wrong move could send them both tumbling down the mountainside. Her back ached terribly, and her legs felt like they were made of lead. But she noticed that David's breathing was becoming steadier, which gave her hope that he was getting stronger. "How much farther?" David asked. "About a mile," Maria replied, though she wasn't entirely sure. In the darkness, with her exhaustion clouding her judgment, distances were hard to judge. That's when they heard the sound that made both their hearts stop. Dogs barking in the distance, followed by shouts in a foreign language. Enemy patrols with tracking dogs were somewhere nearby, searching the hills. Maria immediately left the main path and headed into thicker forest, where the trees would provide cover. But moving through the undergrowth with David on her back was much more difficult. Branches caught at their clothes, and roots threatened to trip them with every step. "They're getting closer," David whispered urgently. "You need to hide me somewhere. And save yourself. We stay together," Maria replied firmly. She found a small cave hidden behind some bushes and carefully maneuvered them inside. They pressed against the back wall, barely breathing as the sounds of the search party grew louder. Flashlight beams swept past the entrance of their hiding place. They could hear soldiers talking and dogs sniffing around just outside. Maria's heart pounded so loudly, she was sure the enemy would hear it. David's hand found hers in the darkness and squeezed gently, trying to offer comfort despite his own fear. For 20 terrifying minutes, they remained perfectly still as the patrol searched the area around their cave. Maria's legs cramped from holding the same position for so long, but she didn't dare move. Finally, the voices began to fade as the patrol moved on to search other areas. When Maria was sure they were safe, she carefully helped David back onto her shoulders. Her body had stiffened during their hiding time, making the weight feel even heavier than before. But they had to keep moving. Every minute they delayed was another minute that David's life hung in the balance. The final stretch of their journey was the most difficult. Maria's energy was almost completely drained, and she stumbled frequently. Several times she fell to her knees, but each time she forced herself back up. David tried to help by shifting his weight to make it easier for her, but there was little he could do in his injured condition. "I can see lights ahead," David said suddenly, his voice filled with hope and disbelief. "Maria, I think that's the town." Maria looked up and saw the distant glow of San Rafael spread out below them. The sight gave her a final burst of energy. They had made it through the most dangerous part of the journey. The hospital was less than half a mile away now. "We did it," she whispered, tears of exhaustion and relief streaming down her face. "No," David corrected her softly. "You did it. You did the impossible." As they made their way down the final hill toward the town, Maria felt her grandfather's presence strongly beside her. She had honored his teachings about helping others, even when it seemed impossible. She had proven that determination and heart could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The lights of San Rafael grew brighter with each painful step, promising safety, medical care, and the end of the most challenging journey of Maria's life. The emergency room doors of San Rafael General Hospital burst open at 2 in the morning. Maria stumbled inside, David still on her back, both of them covered in dirt, sweat, and blood. The night shift nurse looked up from her paperwork and gasped in shock at the sight before her. "Help us," Maria managed to say before her legs finally gave out completely. She collapsed to her knees, and David rolled carefully off her back onto the floor. Both of them were breathing heavily, exhausted beyond anything they had ever experienced. "Get a stretcher now," the nurse shouted to the orderlies. "Call Dr. Rodriguez immediately." Within minutes, the hospital sprang into action. David was lifted onto a gurney and rushed toward the operating room, while Maria was helped into a wheelchair. Her legs were shaking so badly she couldn't stand, and her back felt like it was on fire from the strain of carrying someone twice her weight for 3 miles. Dr. Rodriguez, the hospital's chief surgeon, examined David quickly and shook his head in amazement. "This man should be dead," he told the nurses. "He's lost a dangerous amount of blood, but somehow he's stable. How did he get here?" "The small woman brought him," the nurse explained. "She carried him here on her back." The doctor looked over at Maria sitting in the wheelchair, taking in her tiny frame and exhausted state. "That's impossible. No one could carry a man his size that far." "Tell that to her," the nurse replied. As David was prepared for surgery, he grabbed Maria's hand weakly. "Thank you," he whispered. "I owe you my life." "Just get better," Maria replied with a tired smile. The surgery took 4 hours. Maria refused to leave the hospital during that time, despite the doctor's suggestions that she go home and rest. She sat in the waiting room, every muscle in her body aching, but unable to relax until she knew David would be okay. Nurses brought her food and coffee, amazed by what she had accomplished. When Dr. Rodriguez finally emerged from the operating room, he was smiling. "He's going to make it," he announced. "We removed the shrapnel from his shoulder and leg, repaired the damaged blood vessels, and gave him several transfusions. He'll need time to recover, but he should make a full recovery." Maria felt tears of relief stream down her face. All the pain, exhaustion, and fear had been worth it. She had saved a life. News of Maria's incredible rescue spread quickly through the town and eventually reached military headquarters. Within a week, reporters arrived to interview the small woman who had done the impossible. Maria was uncomfortable with all the attention, insisting she had only done what anyone would do. "But most people couldn't do what you did," one reporter pointed out. "How did you find the strength to carry someone so much larger than yourself for 3 miles? Maria thought carefully before answering. "My grandfather always told me that real strength comes from the heart, not from muscles. When you truly care about someone, you can do things you never thought possible." The story of Maria's rescue made headlines across the country. She was awarded the Medal of Courage by the military and received commendations from various organizations. But the recognition that meant the most to her came in a letter from David's family. David's wife Sarah wrote, "You brought my husband home to his children. You gave our family back our future. No words can express our gratitude for your courage and selflessness. You are a hero in every sense of the word." David recovered completely from his injuries and was eventually able to return to his family. Before he left San Rafael, he visited Maria to thank her once more. He found her back at work in a local clinic, treating patients with the same gentle care she had shown him. "I've been thinking about what you did," David told her. "Everyone said it was impossible, but you proved them wrong. You changed my entire understanding of what one person can accomplish." "I just did what felt right," Maria replied humbly. "No, you did much more than that. You showed that the size of someone's heart matters more than the size of their body. You showed that courage isn't about not being afraid, but about doing what needs to be done despite the fear." Years later, Maria continued working as a medic, saving lives and helping others. She never married, dedicating her life to serving those in need. She kept David's family photo on her desk, a reminder of why her work mattered. David returned to his farm and raised his children with stories about the brave woman who had saved their father's life. He taught them that heroes don't always look like what you expect, and that the most powerful force in the world is someone who refuses to give up when others are counting on them. The path that Maria had taken that night became known locally as Hero's Trail. Young people from the village would hike it to test their endurance, but none ever attempted to carry the kind of load that Maria had managed. The trail served as a permanent reminder that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they find the strength to push beyond what seems possible. Maria's story inspired countless others to believe in themselves and to help those in need, regardless of the challenges they might face. She had proven that when someone truly needs help, there is always a way to provide it, even when everyone else says it can't be done. In the end, Maria's greatest achievement wasn't just saving one soldier's life. She had shown the world that the human spirit, when fueled by compassion and determination, knows no limits. She had carried more than just David Mitchell for 3 miles that night. She had carried hope, proving that miracles happen when ordinary people decide to do extraordinary things. The small woman who everyone thought would give out had instead given everything she had to save a life. And in doing so, she had given the world a powerful reminder that heroes come in all sizes, and that the greatest strength of all is the willingness to never give up on another human being.